Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Zoom. I'm Delegate Jesse Pippi, and I am the chair of the House Minority Caucus Legislative Steering Committee. Today, we are announcing legislation to address violent crime and also to remedy several negative consequences of last year's anti-police laws. Ensuring the safety of our citizens, children, communities, and businesses is a fundamental role of government. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure prosecutors and police have the tools they need to combat the plague of violent crime in our state. I will now turn it over to the House Minority Leader, Jason Buckle, who will present our first bill.
Thank you, Delegate Pippi. As we continue to grapple with this crime crisis that's affecting communities across Maryland, one thing we know is that the majority of the perpetrators of these terrible crimes are, in fact, repeat offenders. The No Bail for Violent Criminals Act of 2022 is designed to keep these repeat violent offenders off the streets while they await justice in our criminal system. The act would prohibit bail for an individual charged with a crime of violence if the individual already has pending charges for a previous crime of violence. That's just common sense. The bill also would prohibit bail for an individual charged with a crime of violence if they had a prior conviction, again, for a violent crime, and the individual had been on parole or probation within 5 years of their subsequent charge of a violent crime. Basically, we're looking to prohibit bail for repeat violent criminals who need to be kept in jail to protect our citizens. One of the impetus for this bill from our caucus was a terrible event that happened last summer here in the city of Annapolis, a senseless crime that occurred only blocks from our state house. While standing on the patio of the Graduate Hotel, Michelle Cummings, the mother of a new midshipman here at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, was murdered when she was hit by a stray bullet. The gunman had eight prior violent crime convictions, but yet he was put on home detention while he awaited trial again on handgun and drug charges. Because he was a repeat career violent criminal, he cut off his ankle bracelet. And the day that he shot and killed Michelle Cummings, he'd already fired a gun multiple times at 2 people sitting in a parked car about a block away. That crime, that terrible, senseless crime, could have been prevented. It's a tragedy that Michelle Cummings is not here today with her family. It's heartbreaking that she doesn't get to see her son play football for the Naval Academy, graduate, and go on to serve our nation. But it's infuriating that she's not here because a brutal predator with an extensive history of violence was given the opportunity by our legal system to walk free after being charged with yet another violent crime, still being in possession of a handgun. What in the world would we think that he was doing in the possession of a handgun as a violent criminal? This is madness, and it's going on all across different communities in our state. Certainly not the only example. It has to stop, and that's what our bill is designed to do. We don't think it's a partisan issue at all. It shouldn't be. It's designed to stop these career violent criminals. I'll now turn it over to Delegate Kathy Jalega to introduce some of our other legislative initiatives on this topic.
Thank you, Delegate Buckle. As Maryland continues to struggle to bring this violent crime crisis under control, citizens in Maryland are counting on our public safety professionals to have all the tools and information possible to keep our communities safe. In our state, with expanding sanctuary policies that protect illegal immigrants, the Protecting Marylanders from Violent Crime Act of 2022 requires state and local correctional facilities to comply with ICE detainers for those convicted of violent crimes, terrorism, and participation in criminal street gangs. States with these dangerous sanctuary policies are finding themselves subjected to federal subpoenas for information they should readily be providing immigration officials. This lack of cooperation with ICE blocks federal investigations and takes up resources that could be better spent getting violent criminals off our streets. More importantly, releasing violent criminals into the community when they're wanted by ICE endangers the public. In Anne Arundel County, 6 MS-13 gang members from the Baltimore, Washington area who call their gang the Fulton Locos are being held for 2 gruesome murders, including a beheading, and for gang activities. ICE has a detainer on these people and will deport them once they're released. Anne Arundel County must cooperate with ICE to protect the public from these dangerous criminals. We need House Bill 756. Public safety should not be dependent on the political agendas of elected officials. To be clear, this legislation only impacts people who are in our country illegally and who are being held in a jail or detention center or committing a violent crime. No one should want to protect violent criminals, gang members, or terrorists wanted by ICE. This should be an issue where we can find common ground. Delegate Brenda Cham will now announce the first 2 bills to address the negative consequences of the 2021 anti-police laws passed by the General Assembly.
Thank you, Delegate Schlager. We know that neighborhood policing and the relationships these strategies foster between law enforcement and the community are a public success story. When the community has complaints and concerns about their law enforcement, they should be part of the process that address them. Under current law, they are left out of the process. Police accountability boards and administrative charge committees, municipal corporations would allow the municipalities to have their own accountability boards and administrative charging committees, entities that were created under last year's police reform legislation. This bill will create accountability boards and administrative charging committees at the municipal level to keep the community involved in promoting public safety in their cities, towns, and neighborhoods. I'll now turn it over to Delegate Anderton, who will discuss funding for body-worn cameras.
Thank you so much, Delegate Cham. So up next is a bill that deals with something that I've experienced personally being a former mayor, and that is implementing body-worn cameras and vehicle cameras. And moving forward, as we pass legislation mandating these, which I think is needed as protections not only for law enforcement, but for the general public as a whole, these must be implemented between 2023 and 2025. The cost of these cameras is extremely burdensome, especially to smaller municipalities like mine. They could be up to $2,400 per camera. This could be statewide in the neighborhood of $32 million. That's a $32 million unfunded mandate on our law enforcement agencies. So the Body Worn Cameras Funding Act of 2022 is very simple. It just says that the state will make funds available for these municipalities and these other jurisdictions that are struggling financially to, of course, purchase body-worn cameras and get their programs up and running for these protections that are vital to all of us. So especially for our smaller, more rural departments, if the state is going to mandate things, then the state should pay for it. It's quite simple. So I'll turn it over to Delegate Pippi to wrap us up and send us home.
You know, there's no one solution to address violent crime in Maryland. Every member of the General Assembly wants safer communities. The House Republican Caucus are offering reasonable solutions to help achieve this goal and to make Maryland a safe place to live, work, learn, and retire. Thank everyone for coming today. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.